Throughout history, battles have been won and lost, empires have risen and fallen, and the fate of nations has often hinged on a single decision. But what happens when that decision is catastrophically wrong? Today, we're diving into some of the greatest military mistakes in history, blunders so epic they changed the course of the world. These aren't just minor tactical errors. They are monumental failures of judgment, strategy, and sometimes just plain common sense. Let's start in the dense forests of ancient Germany. It's the year 09 AD. The mighty Roman Empire, a military machine unlike any other, is pushing to expand its borders. Three of its finest legions, about 20,000 men, are led by the governor Publius Quinctilius Varus. They're marching through the Teutoburg forest, confident in their superiority. But they have a guide, a trusted Germanic chieftain named Arminius. The problem? Arminius was a Roman citizen and officer, but his loyalty was to his own people. He was leading Varus and his legions straight into a trap. The Romans, stretched out in a long, thin column over miles of difficult terrain, were ambushed by a coalition of Germanic tribes. Pinned down, unable to form their famous battle lines, and battered by torrential rain, they were systematically slaughtered over 3 days. Varus, seeing no escape, took his own life. The defeat was so total that the Romans lost 3 entire legions and their prized eagle standards. The psychological impact was immense. Emperor Augustus was said to have roamed his palace for months, banging his head against the walls and crying, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." This disaster halted Roman expansion east of the Rhine River, forever shaping the map of Europe. The mistake? Overconfidence and placing absolute trust in a single, unvetted source. Now, let's fast forward over 1800 years to another ambitious leader with a penchant for invading vast, cold lands, Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1812, Napoleon was at the height of his power, controlling most of Europe. But one nation still defied him, Russia. To crush this final opponent, he assembled the Grande Army, the largest European army ever seen, with over 600,000 soldiers. His plan was simple, a quick, decisive victory. He expected to march into Russia, defeat their army in a single massive battle, and forced Tsar Alexander I to sue for peace. The Russians, however, refused to play his game. Instead of meeting him in open battle, they employed a scorched earth policy, retreating deeper and deeper into their own country, burning everything in their wake. They destroyed crops, villages, and supplies, leaving nothing for the invading French army to live off. Napoleon's supply lines, already stretched thin, completely broke down. By the time he reached Moscow, it was a deserted, burning city. With no supplies, no surrender from the Tsar, and the brutal Russian winter setting in, Napoleon had no choice but to retreat. The retreat was one of the great horrors of military history. Starvation, frostbite, and constant attacks from Russian partisans decimated the Grande Army. Of the more than 600,000 men who marched into Russia, fewer than 100,000 staggered out. Napoleon's mistake was a fatal underestimation of his enemy and the environment. He assumed the Russians would fight on his terms, and he completely ignored the logistical nightmare of supplying a massive army in a hostile, barren landscape. This catastrophic failure was the beginning of the end for his empire. From the snows of Russia, we travel to the trenches of World War I, and a plan so flawed it has become a byword for military incompetence, the Gallipoli Campaign. In 1915, the war on the Western Front was a bloody stalemate. Winston Churchill, then Britain's first Lord of the Admiralty, championed a bold idea: open a new front. The plan was to sail a fleet through the Dardanelles Strait, knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war, and open a supply line to Russia. On paper, it sounded brilliant. The execution was a disaster from the start. A purely naval attempt to force the strait failed due to underwater mines. So, the Allies decided on an amphibious landing on the Gallipoli Peninsula. The problem was the element of surprise was gone. The Ottoman forces, commanded by the brilliant Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, were waiting for them. Allied troops from Britain, France, Australia, and New Zealand landed on heavily defended beaches, and were met with a wall of machine gun fire. Instead of a swift breakthrough, the campaign bogged down into the same trench warfare hellscape they were trying to escape on the Western Front. The conditions were horrific: scorching heat, rampant disease, constant shelling, and a chronic shortage of water. After 8 months of brutal fighting and over 250,000 casualties on each side, the Allies evacuated. They had gained nothing. The mistake was the cascade of errors: poor intelligence, underestimating the enemy's resolve, terrible planning, and a fundamental misunderstanding of terrain. Gallipoli was a costly, bloody failure that achieved none of its objectives. Finally, we arrive at World War II, and a decision made not on the battlefield, but in a leader's mind. In May 1940, Hitler's blitzkrieg had swept through France. The British Expeditionary Force, along with French and Belgian troops, was trapped. Their backs to the sea at the port of Dunkirk, over 300,000 men were cornered, seemingly doomed. The German panzer divisions were just miles away, poised for the final kill. And then Hitler issued a startling order: halt. For 3 crucial days, the German tanks stopped. Why? Historians still debate the exact reasons. Was it Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, convincing Hitler his air force could finish the job alone? Was Hitler worried about his tanks getting bogged down in a marshy terrain? Or was he hoping to offer a magnanimous peace deal to Britain after a show of force? Whatever the reason, it was a colossal blunder. This halt order gave the British a window of opportunity they desperately needed. In one of the most remarkable rescue operations in history, Operation Dynamo, a flotilla of naval ships and hundreds of small civilian boats, fishing trawlers, yachts, ferries sailed across the English Channel and evacuated over 338,000 Allied soldiers from the beaches. While the British had to abandon all their heavy equipment, they saved their army. These were experienced soldiers who would form the core of the force that would eventually fight back and defeat Nazi Germany. Had Hitler's panzers rolled into Dunkirk, the war might have ended very differently. The mistake was a moment of inexplicable hesitation that allowed the enemy to escape and fight another day. From the hubris of a Roman governor to the logistical folly of an emperor, the poor planning of Allied commanders, and the strange hesitation of a dictator, these military mistakes remind us that in war, nothing is certain. They show how arrogance, underestimation, and a single bad decision can have consequences that echo for centuries. History is filled with tales of brilliant victories, but it's often in the study of its greatest failures that we find the most valuable lessons. Thanks for watching. What other historical blunders do you think changed the world? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through history's biggest mistakes, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. See you next time.